I'd love to use this as a podcast episode. I think this
Really?
is, yeah, I think
But
this
I
is
just
good.
said I want to shit on Elon Musk. And
Yeah,
I said
that's fine.
shit.
We've got a bleeper.
It's in.
And he's not going to watch this.
He's not
Elon's
going to watch
gonna
it.
get in touch.
We're here, myself, Paul Booth. Do we want to just introduce ourselves?
Loretta. Locke.
I'm Freya Sewell.
I am Fred Sudell.
Okay,
Good.
so
Fred
the
and
reason we got together today was because obviously Loretta, Fred, we're already kind of working together on this, and this is us, and I think this is interesting to people. This is us bringing someone else into the project who is embracing the project, and we are embracing all of your ideas.
Thank you.
Somebody throw
welcome,
some
Freya.
flowers around her neck and
Yeah,
welcome her to the
like
new
our
house.
thing.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about in just a few minutes, which was the difficulties of of coming into a new group when a project's already started, and what we were trying to get across today, which was, should this be on Venus? That's a big question for the story. It is weird trying to bring someone into a group, and I think it's weird coming into the group, but I was curious, like, Freya, how you feel, why did you what interested you about this, and how does it feel kind of coming into it?
Yeah, well, it feels pretty good coming into it, because I'm so aligned with the interests that you guys have and the subjects that you're exploring. Like, I have spent a lot of time already. I kind of have a bunch of narrative and concepts that I'm excited to change and develop and mold with you guys about this exact area. That this is something that I find super interesting. I've been waiting for an optimistic offering to come up on the of options to investigate, because so a lot of time it's been like, hey, do you want to make another shoot 'em up with me? Hey, do you want to help me make my cyberpunk laser game? And I'm like, no, if I have to make another cyberpunk thing, I'm gonna kill myself and everyone else. So this was a very refreshing offering of, like, how can we actually create truly innovative future visions that are not just reusing the same tropes over and over. So for me, it feels like a good fit, and we may disagree on some points, and I hope that we do, and we can argue and just discuss and create something better that way.
You're in.
How does it feel? How does it feel the other side? Because I had my initial, when we talked, Freya was like, oh, this really feels like such a great fit, and there were so many crossovers, and exactly as you say, and I felt like, as I did when I met Loretta, I thought, wow, this person doesn't quite think like me, but we've got common ground. That means that I'll be pushed, tested. I'll have to go away and think about stuff. Like the Venus, you introduced that idea, Loretta, and said, I think it should be set on Venus. And my immediate reaction was, oh no, how am I going to talk her out of this? And
it's all about the theme of the film. It's all about adapting and change and evolution. And yeah, it's good.
It's very meta, very not in a sort
Paul, you've had to adapt. You've had to adapt, you fossil.
Exactly. I know, this is grey there. It is
no,
fossilizing.
But this is good, because like what we're building is too great for any one of us to have come up with. Yeah. So that's why we're stronger together. It's going to be something very formidable, I think, at the end of it.
There's some really interesting ideas that have emerged from the conversation that people, I guess, are about to hear, because it's already happened for us, but it will happen in a minute for them. But this will be the episode where I get convinced that actually I think this is a good idea, that if this is on Venus. And I was completely against that. And we watched a 12-minute video together. We had a little watch party, and then some interesting things were raised during that. And now I'm kind of convinced. I think there's so many interesting ideas in that video that I think we should explore more.
I think the reason why we were both put off by Venus was because when with the knowledge that I had before watching this about Venus, I think, oh, there's no possibility. And now after seeing that video, it's like, oh, there's loads of possibilities. So it's, there's freedom to explore.
When you combine it with time, have you read any Ken Stanley Robinson? He's like the
yeah.
But, and not just his Mars stuff, but also his other stuff. And it so much more becomes possible when you extend the amount of time that the story happens in. Which I think is also really important for, like, our human thinking right now extending our thinking to more to the future rather than just our immediacy. I think is a good exercise.
And we can do that across different mediums. Like Loretta was saying earlier, we can do that across games, comics, just books, just words. There's lots of ways that people can find a way into this. And I think we should explore those.
And I think that's what great sci-fi should be. It should be that moment, like Fred was describing, where you go from, oh no, that's just impossible, I cannot imagine it, to wow, this is just an amazing opportunity. Let's do it. Like, it should be that.
And Musk grew up reading the same stuff that we were reading, which was all Mars-based, all kind of let's send a big rocket over to somewhere. This is a different approach. This is a nurturing approach. And the approach to terraforming that planet aligns itself to the approach that you have to take a sort of macro level to a micro level. Like we said, that you give things nudges, you encourage things to grow as they need to grow, and you nurture things. And that's happening, that adaptation. The settlers in the red houses, they're the people that are going there first to say, kind of, how does this, the algae, the other things are already here. Now, how do we sort of harness that? How do we do the next step? Because what we don't want to do is just land something there and say, right, let's all live in. You don't make it on Earth and bring it in. You need to grow it, and
it's not that cut. Yeah, you need to be in the action, managing it, juggling it. Yeah.
Well, here's a question, which is on a practical sense. How do we, Fred? Do you want to give us a quick update on what's been going on with Murphy and Houdini, and where we are with that and where we're going? And then that will tie in, I think, to a conversation with Freya about, practically on the story level. I think these are amazing conversations. We've really nailed something this week, and that feels like great progress. So what's happened progress-wise, Fred, with Murphy? What's going on with Houdini?
Well, Houdini, whatchamacallit, Murphy is putting together a nice little bit of code for us in the form of this graph, which will allow us to semi-randomly generate our little robots through essentially, I'm very, very bad at explaining this because without using extremely technical terms.
But it's procedural. I think we can say it's procedural, right?
Essentially, I'm going to create base models, things like bits of limb, bits of head, which then will be procedurally altered to make them asymmetrical randomly. And they will be configured in a way that we can just press a button and a random robot will be generated that has the same style and feel as the concept ones we've been going through.
And he can make this in Houdini
this weekend, right? Because he's asked me to do some models for it. We had a discussion yesterday because we've both been deciding on. We've been talking about those wires because we want to have like maybe sort of bits and pieces like dangling wires coming down off of things like for hydraulic pipes. I guess it would be like a vascular system for a robot in the same way that we have things like veins and stuff in the intestines. But we're thinking out a way of, instead of using the kit bash models for the wires, we're actually going to procedurally do them using splines and have them connect to empty sockets on the robot that didn't come with a pre-generated eye or something. Without visual cues, it's really hard to explain, but we are going to have a finished test for us to explore, hopefully by the first half of next week, and then it's just development from there.
So we came up with this kit bash thing as we thought it might be a way forward. We might it's an easy way to reuse stuff. They're quite cheap. There's some really good kit bash stuff out there which we could link to for people if anyone's interested.
Some of the ones that you've linked that you showed me, two specifically are very, very appropriate for the project.
Okay.
And I would actually like to explore a few other kit bashes sets other than those mechanical ones, because there are a lot of
there's some more organic ones and hydraulics. Is everyone familiar with kit bash? Do we all know what this is? Yeah. So it's just I love the fact that these really good artists are sitting around making this stuff and then selling it for $15, $30, $50. And I'm really happy if they can make a living off that, and just giving you all the sort of Lego pieces to say, go and build whatever you want. I've built bits of this for you. It means some things kind of look the same, but the fact that they take it to a more, not molecular level, but there's a, the individual parts.
It's modular. It's a little bit like how you could build a car and you could say that you built this car, but you didn't build the components for the car, you bought them.
Exactly. And I
yeah.
think that's what makes this possible for us to make a film like this, is because we're not making the game engine. And I, as trying to creatively direct this thing in that sense, there's an element of being a bit of a producer here as well, which is trying to look for ways to not to cut practical corners because it's a small team without compromising too
juice.
much on what's actually there.
stuff.
But there's no need to have, we don't have an army of assets, artists. We don't, there's not even different departments. It's kind of, people need to just dig in and do what they can, but there's absolutely no need to make things that we don't need to make. So we're thinking, Fred, a lot of your time is going to be focused on things like substance designer, right? Can you, how does that fit in, and what's a trim sheet maybe, or do we just...
So one of the ways in which Murphy and I are going to get the most variety out of these randomly generated robots is by reusing the same materials through trim sheets, which is more actually of something they do with games. Particularly nowadays, it's just the mobile games tend to use that. Like AA games don't use trim sheets really anymore, and certainly not in film. But for our purposes, we can. You know what a trim sheet is?
Worth explaining it, I think,
for everyone. So it's for our point, we're going to, I think we do horizontal strips across that square texture space. So we'll have like a metal material that has different details that go along horizontally, so that then we can adjust the UVs on the model vertically to give it a different appearance. So the bottom might have some, some grating, and then there might be some wires, but then on the model that will be randomly jiggled about, and then you'll get wires coming out in different places. It should all be cohesive. The UVs and the trim sheet aspect of it is probably the most precarious part, because we're going to be warping the models at the beginning, and that will affect the UV. So we might have to come up with a way of how we could triplanar project some of the bits onto it and then UV wrap some of it. But that's just experimentation that, until I have another meeting with Murphy, probably either this evening or on Monday, we'll have a proper update for that. But it's just,
and he's really, I mean, we're all on Mastered, we've all been trying to find our feet and figure out what we want. Murphy is when I first spoke to him, he was still sort of realizing that he was a tech artist, but after having a couple of meetings with him, he's a tech artist. He's really good, and he thinks in such a uniquely sort of mix of a technical and a creative space, and he's such an enabler.
I love him.
I honestly don't know why he doesn't already have a job.
No, I don't. Same.
Bizarre.
Exactly.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No, I really get on with him, and I feel like it's what I really wanted to do coming into Mastered. I'm empowered to do with his skill set.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I feel like I'm helping him out, because I know that he said that he's more technical than artist, and I'm more artist than technical, but we have a similar vision and a similar kind of idea of how things should
get my
work.
plug.
All right. So I think, Loretta, you said there might be do you want to do an update on story now, or
just a really, really quick update, I guess. This week, Fred and I got together on Monday, and we had a really, really good meeting, and we talked a lot about the technology of our sci-fi universe, and we solved a lot of problems by starting with a story idea and filling in all the details. And I would recommend that method to other people who are world building, to start off with a story of one person, one character, and to fill in her backstory and her world, to fill in that world. And I love that even just in this session with you guys, I've gotten a lot more ideas for that webcomic.
Yeah.
I love the thing that Freya said about a fossil record of previous robots that is already there when the humans arrive 1,000 years later. I just love that image. And I want to work it into the webcomic somehow. I'm
gonna go on Mid-Journey and do
fossils.
Yeah,
exactly that.
Yeah.
I got my invite to Dali finally.
Oh, congratulations!
So I think if I can get you in, I'll get you in. I don't know if do I get something, I don't know, but it would be. I really want to try the out painting. I really want to see if we can work
that could be really useful for us as well. That if we make a collage, we can pop that in and then make it kind bigger.
Fill in. I'll have a play with it and kind of see what we get to. So
You're
okay, yeah, there's a
excited about
webcomic.
that.
So the priority at the moment is because Murphy's away during like the whole of October. So the priority at the moment is to Fred, Murphy to work together to try and explore these robots, and obviously with Substance Painter and what you know about Substance Painter, Fred, you bringing in I think these other ideas of how metal does it need to be, and but how do we, Freya, you want to do some modeling. Can you tell us a bit more about your background skill set, where you want to kind of come into this?
Yeah, I think it could be something to embrace, that I can be quite rude about some of the ways that people are seeing DALL-E, and like I think there's a lot of like I think differently about it as a tool than you three, and I think that can be a good thing. So I don't want to go to DALL-E and do that. Like for me, I want to like draw and create and model from these ideas. But let me just get, because like I'm trying to understand kind of where there is space for me to do it. Because Loretta, if you're saying that you're a character designer, because I consider myself to be a character designer, so you're already kind of taking on that role of designing the main character.
Yep, that's right.
And then if Fred, if you're doing, because I also could love to do these like organic bots, but the bots are already being done as well, it sounds to me. So I'm not sure what it is, Paul, that you think I could do.
I think you should join me and Murphy then. If you because the thing is, I can't do it all by myself, and just because I am doing it at the moment doesn't mean your input would be amazing. Like it would just add that extra dimension.
Yeah, we need to share the load
with Murphy. I was actually just, before you continue, Fred, like I took a look at your online presence and I looked at some of your furniture stuff, and it got me thinking that you should also be in the meeting with the architects as well. Because if like I can't model everything, and everything's going to need to be modeled, and if you've got like experience particularly with furniture, and we've also got experts in architecture, it makes sense that we all talk together and have conversations together.
The main set is a house. It's a domestic setting, so we're going to need you to model the domestic furniture of 3,000 years from now. What's that going to look like?
And that's going to be married into the architecture. Like they're not going to be separate like we have here. They'll probably be.
And I think that the thing about character design and erg design is that it's all as fluid as it can be until the very last moment, doing it Paul style, right? Fluid as it can be until the very last moment when we make the final decision. So I'll send you over all of the fiction that I've written, the world building, the backstory, the technology brief, and I'll see what you think of it, and you can feed back to me, and we'll see what we can do together.
Okay.
Yeah, just because you're a latecomer, we're still a democracy. Like, and
it's like Loretta's saying. I think there's an immense amount of vulnerability and openness around how we're exploring ideas until we kind of say, okay, that's where the idea is going to stop. Now let's build from that. Like it's
and we did have some shit ideas in the beginning. We weren't afraid to put them out there. Yeah.
Robot bats.
Robot bat. Yeah. No, that was a compromise. That was a compromise that we shouldn't have done. Yeah.
It was a good idea. It was a good idea.
But no, I love all of those things sound wonderful to be involved in. And yeah, the what a domestic environment would look like at this point is a very interesting question.
I think having worked in some very early startups, one of the things that happens there is people say, like, we need a designer, we need an engineer, and there's not an awful lot of direction for that person. It's like, find your way in, do what you can do, say
drive yourself,
like hustle for it, find a way in, say that, okay, this is where I think I can make a contribution, and I think doing some stuff with Loretta, doing some stuff with Fred will help you figure out, okay, this is where I can, and then with the architects exposes you to all the stuff that we're exposing ourselves to, and I think that's how we're going to figure out that this works. But I think this is interesting for people because in the same way it's hard to bring like a new bass player into a band because you're like, this is how we play, and this is, but you've got to let that person.
If they bring a new instrument,
Yeah, exactly.
I think everyone's role in our team has been an emergent quality.
Yeah,
like people have come in and figured out what needs doing and have done it. I think that's just how it's been. So
it's because nobody's
there's no fiefdoms either. Nobody's sort of trying to hold on to things too much. There's a responsibility. Loretta has the responsibility of the story of the writing, but she's bringing it in from everybody else. And
I think the important thing is that we trust each other. Like I know that, you know, we're not going to run off with an idea that's terrible because we've all got our eyes on it and we're all, we all care about it. So
I think that's good. I think, welcome. Really glad to have you on board, Freya. This is great.
Thank you so much for welcoming me in. That's really, I'm generous to open like this. And I think it's a really, 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 really timely, like we need more discussions like this in the public eye. So I'm super happy to be involved in one.
yeah,
Great.
awesome.
Okay. So then the rest of this will just be people listening to our watching bits of that video. Which is I think that's a perfect episode. I think this is like everything with this, it's naturally emerged as a perfect episode. Right, so how to terraform Venus quickly. Who's this? Oh, this is Kyrgyzstan or whatever that. Yeah, okay, they're in a nutshell. These are great videos.
They're so good.
Yeah,
I
they are
watched
so
all of
good.
them.
Let's go.
Leaving Earth to find new homes in space is an old dream of humanity and will sooner or later be necessary for our survival. The planet that gets the most attention is Mars, a small, toxic and energy-poor planet that just about seems good enough for a colony of depressed humans huddled in underground cities. But what if we think bigger? What if we take Venus, one of the most hostile and deadly places in the solar system, and turn it into a colony? Not by building lofty cloud cities, but by creating a proper second Earth. It might be easier than you think.
I'll say at this point, my feeling at the moment is utter skepticism, and I can feel it. But I don't know. I want to embrace this, but I'm welcoming the idea that what I find instinctively implausible is I'm going to be turned around. So I'm excited by that. But where's everyone else at?
I'm just uncomfortable with the assumption that we need to be making other places into Earth, and I actually don't like the phrase terraforming has always been for me slightly uncomfortable. Like that what if we embrace the planet as it was and changed ourselves? But this like changing the planet, like maybe we should change.
Interesting.
I think the interesting thing is that I would agree with you if we were going to a planet that already had life, but this is something that's barren and requires life. And I think that Earth isn't actually one thing. If you go to any corner of the Earth, it's a completely different place. Like Hawaii is nothing like sub-Saharan Africa, is nothing like Indonesia, is nothing like Antarctica. So I think that like it's just about bringing life to a planet and then having that, it will develop on its own anyway. It will become a unique thing. But it just needs to, I think when I hear like Earth-like, I think, okay, it just needs an atmosphere that can be, that is mostly, it's got oxygen in it for energy.
And then see where it goes. Like
just see what happens.
It's not about trying to have the Sahara it's just make it.
You couldn't create another Earth anyway. You could, you give it, you just wouldn't.
Yeah, I would rather have a totally new garden to like a garden that I've never even heard or thought of that's springing up from this new situation.
Yeah, I mean, it would kind of be like Australia, where you get like organisms that were like introduced there, maybe like millions of years ago, and then through divergent evolution, have just become completely different.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to keep going.
Venus is by far the hottest planet in the solar system, with a surface temperature of 460 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. This heat is due to the most extreme greenhouse effect in the solar system. CO2 is great at trapping heat. Even a rise from 0.03% to 0.04% in Earth's atmosphere is heating up our planet right now. Venus's atmosphere is 97% CO2. Also, Venus's atmosphere is 93 times denser than Earth's. Standing on Venus's surface would feel like taking a dive about 900 meters deep into the ocean. The pressure would kill you instantly. It's a truly horrible place, so why should we even bother?
Yeah, I'm wondering that.
First and foremost, Venus is almost as big as Earth and has 90% of its surface gravity. Surface gravity is a big problem when colonizing the solar system because it's very likely that long stays in low-gravity places will have negative health effects. Venus's size means it could be the second largest habitat in the solar system. a new home for billions of humans and trillions of animals, with oceans, lush forests, and a beautiful blue sky. A properly terraformed Venus may be the most pleasant place to live outside of Earth. While we can't exactly terraform Venus today, a slightly more ambitious future version of us could take this project on.
What this has made me think right now is that actually, in a bit of a sort of borrowing from Asimov's foundation in a way, it's one possible way we could go, I mean, or leave the door open later on, is that there are two things going on, that there maybe there's a divide, and maybe a group of people believe that, you know, Venus was the way, and that's been going on, and a group of people believe that Mars was the way, and that's been going on. And maybe, you know, maybe
go to Venus and the men go to Mars.
The what? Very good. Very good.
Earth is like a breeding ground or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it could be a tale of cooperation.
It could be. It could
Or
be.
positive, yeah. Don't slip into negativity.
No, not as a conflict thing, not as a sort of but you know, if there was, I mean, like every sort of compromise, if there's a case of if you weren't restricted to resources and you had to choose one over the other, wouldn't you, in a very kind of scientific way, try both and say, well, there's, you know, all the stuff that Mars has, Venus doesn't, and all the stuff that Venus has, Mars doesn't. So your starting points are different, and you can't really know which one is going to be better until you take that approach. But they are fundamentally different approaches. Mars is a very, I mean, you joke about the, you know, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but maybe that what we're talking about is actually about nurturing, growing, growth.
It's a little bit
and
like colonizing different planets. Like when you colonize, colonize different countries. When we colonized USA, it was we brought a lot of horses with us. There weren't horses there before we brought them, and we needed them for all sorts of things. And when we colonized Australia, horses didn't work. We brought camels to build railways and stuff. So, but I imagine that, from what Freya said earlier about, you know, having non-metallic robots, or having, if the robots were designed to require some very basic needs that humans also require, like they need an oxygen, they need oxygen in the atmosphere, they need less carbon dioxide to survive. We design them in that way initially, so that when we send the first thing to Mars centuries before people, they will develop and create the planet so that it's suitable for us, because we've made it so that they require it as well. So
it's interesting because it makes me think of things like agent-based modeling, and which is something I always found very interesting. Is that there's a book called The Nature of Code. This guy has a YouTube channel. And he's I forget, Daniel Schiffman, I think his name is. And The Nature of Code came off the back of this program called Processing. I think it's called. Is it called Processing? But the idea was you could just make stuff, and it's perfectly suited to making kind of agent-based things and organic things. So you can quite easily create boids and which are, you know, basically you can reproduce the behavior of birds or flying animals or of things that need to find their way by just adding bits to them. And there's that great book, I think I mentioned it to you, Loretta. And it's fascinating. Actually, Fred, you really need to. Have you ever heard of a book called Vehicles?
No.
Okay, it's literally, it starts with the most basic entity that we could create with code or as a small robot. Basically, it says what's the simplest system you could build that actually looks like it's alive.
I love what you're saying, but could we watch the movie?
Sorry, yes. It's making me think a lot about things. So let's go.
Before anything else, we need to cool Venus down and remove the gas that makes up the extremely heavy atmosphere.
Right.
As mentioned, there's a lot of it, around 465 billion tons. How do we do that? There are a few options. We could create giant solar collectors powering a huge array of laser beams that heat up the atmosphere so much that it's blasted into space. Although we would need thousands of times the entire power generating capacity of humanity, and it would still take thousands of years to remove the atmosphere. Another way is to sequester the atmosphere, binding the CO2 in different compounds through chemical reactions. We could mine elements like calcium or magnesium on Mercury and shoot them at Venus via mass driver systems, electric rails that make rockets unnecessary on smaller planets.
Crazy.
The metals would combine to bind the CO2 into different carbonates basically forever. But the scale makes the
This is
whole
what the robot should be made
practical.
of.
We would need several 100 billion tons of material to sequester the CO2 this way. Seems like a waste of material and might take too long. An equally ridiculous idea that could actually work is to put Venus in the shade, literally, by constructing a huge mirror to blot out the sun to just freeze the atmosphere.
I love that they basically those first two ideas were really complicated, kind of Elon Musk type, you know.
But this is the best one. This is
And
I
the
don't
best
know,
one
I
is
don't
the
know if
simplest one.
This one is cool. This one is cool, but I also thought, like, we were talking about what the robots could be made from. Like, what if the robots go way before us and make themselves out of the CO2 and then combine that with the mirror? I actually always think that, like, why choose one option when you can combine?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that like
yeah.
sparkly.
For
What does
sure.
calcite look like? Could robots make themselves out of the atmosphere and by doing that transform it into something suitable for humans in the same way that algae and
Yes.
smaller things in the ocean did to make our oxygen atmosphere?
Yes, 100%. The algae are coming. The algae are coming at like minute number 10.
Right. Okay. This is good. I can feel myself being won over to this idea. Thank you, Loretta.
Yeah, well
The
done.
mirror doesn't need to be complex or massive, just a very thin foil with a little structural support. Building such a large
Sorry, was that coronavirus?
Yeah, what the hell was that?
They can be made out of coronaviruses.
Great. Okay, that sounds
Okay.
useful.
Okay. Just wash it afterwards.
flat surface so close to the sun will turn it effectively into a solar sail and push it out of position. So instead of one giant circular object, our mirror will consist of many different pieces. Annular slats of angled
Cool.
mirrors can reflect sunlight from one set of mirrors to the next.
That looks fucking
Mirrors would be
awesome.
angled,
That does look awesome. This is really
reflecting
clever.
light from one to another until the light is redirected to the back, balancing the force on the front and holding them in position.
That's very elegant.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
It's
this is what I
really,
think.
really
This
nice.
is the best thing ever.
When you mentioned it, and I realised your excitement now when you did, I was just thinking of the sort of one giant thing, and actually, again,
No,
just as I
it's
was thinking,
fake
that
clockwork,
feels
isn't
sort of
it?
brutally.
That would be so beautiful. You can just like instantly kind of your brain can start dreaming of how this incredible rotating multifaceted sparkling mirror in space would look like.
Yeah,
This is not
I
even the end of
imagine
it.
it would look incredible from the surface of the planet.
yeah.
I remember I watched a YouTube video once. I thought that it was from a movie, but I remembered now it was someone said, well, what if we made a mirror the size of the moon? And what if it came close enough to our atmosphere? What would it look like from the
Oh,
ground?
really? Oh, that's interesting.
And you would be able to see the reflection of the other side of almost the other side of the planet because of the way that it's curved and because where you're curved. You'd be looking up and you could see the planes in America from the UK. It would be like, yeah, it would
that's
be really
strange.
bizarre.
That would be a very interesting
Yeah.
thing to explore.
After
But
a
it's
few
all very
years,
natural.
I was
Sorry.
gonna
Sorry,
say,
sorry.
If you think like J.J. Abrams' style of filmmaking with lots of those really, really vast compositions, you could do a lot with the sky in this scenario to show the mirrors maybe side
Yeah.
on, or it would be really interesting to film. Is all I'm saying.
And
Yeah.
What would sunset and sunrise look like?
Exactly.
Yeah, there'd probably be different ones. Like there'd probably be yeah, I mean, we were talking about before it was Venus, it was going to be a distant planet that we'd not discovered before, that maybe has a binary star system with maybe different color suns and different times of day where the sky would be different colors. But we could probably do something similar with this.
You
Because
can.
it's
You
an
can. If you
artificial-
keep
yeah.
watching.
Let's watch it.
All right,
Let's
sorry,
watch
sorry.
it.
of getting the infrastructure in place, things start slowly and then escalate. For the first few decades, the atmosphere slowly cools down but stays dense and deadly, until after some 60 years, it reaches the critical temperature of 31 degrees Celsius. Suddenly, the Great Flood begins on Venus as CO2 turns to liquid at this pressure and begins to rain down. A constant global rainstorm of unbelievable proportions lasting 30 years. The pressure and temperature suddenly begin to drop in unison. For almost a century, puddles turn into lakes and oceans.
Wow.
The surface temperature is now minus 56 degrees Celsius, and the pressure has dropped to only 7 times the pressure on Earth. Finally, at a really unpleasant minus 81 degrees Celsius, the CO2 oceans begin to freeze and the rain turns into snow. This leaves us with a frozen Venus covered in oceans as hard as rock and gigantic CO2 glaciers. What remains of the atmosphere is mostly nitrogen at about 3 times Earth's surface pressure. If you don't mind freezing and suffocating, you can now take a stroll over Venus's surface. But the frozen CO2 remains a bit of a problem. At some point, we want to warm up the planet, but if we do, the CO2 ice will melt and fill up the atmosphere again. So we need some way to keep it from doing that. One is to simply cover it all with cheap plastic insulation and cover it up with ground-up Venus rock or water oceans. Although some planetary scientists will be very stressed out about us building a new planet containing a potential time bomb like that. A few unfortunately timed volcanoes could melt a lot of CO2 at once and ruin everything. Another obvious solution is to shoot it all out into space and collect it into a small moon for storage and future use. We can make this more efficient by using mass drivers instead of rockets, but moving all that mass will still be a pretty intense challenge that will take some time to solve. Whatever we end up doing with the atmosphere, to move forward we need water, which we could get from ice moons. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, has twice as much water as Earth's oceans. Now, catching a moon and transporting it through the solar system is not exactly easy. So instead, it might be easier to cut chunks of ice off Europa with an army of construction drones and shoot them at Venus using more of those mass drivers. Space tethers could save us a lot of effort and energy here. We made a whole video explaining how they work, but in a nutshell, they are slings that can take a payload on both ends. On Europa, they do most of the work needed to catapult our ice to Venus. The ice hits the Venus tethers, which gently drop it into the atmosphere, where it falls down as snow. In exchange, the Venus tethers get to catch CO2 ice shot up from below and accelerate it into orbit. We can remove excess nitrogen using this same method to further lower our atmospheric pressure. After a few decades or centuries, Venus would be covered by a nice, shallow, frozen ocean a few hundred meters deep. It would look extremely different from today. A few continents and countless islands have formed. This is beginning to look a bit like our planet. Now the last and most magnificent phase of terraforming begins, making the atmosphere breathable and adding life. First, we need light though, and we need to heat the planet up again. A Venus day is 2,802 hours long, more than 116 Earth days. So if we just remove our giant mirror, we would grill half of our planet. Even without the massive atmosphere, temperatures would reach unbearable levels. The simplest way to create a day-night cycle and let some energy in again is with another set of mirrors to illuminate our continents and melt our water oceans.
Wow.
Which would let us completely control how much energy we get and where it goes. The atmosphere is now mostly made up of nitrogen and basically devoid of oxygen. So the first inhabitants will likely be trillions and trillions of cyanobacteria, which can get photosynthesizing and release oxygen. We know that they can quickly turn around the atmosphere of a planet because billions of years ago they were probably responsible for turning the toxic atmosphere of our young Earth into an atmosphere with enough oxygen for more complex animal life. But not only that, cyanobacteria can fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and turn it into nutrients that can be used by living beings. This way, they will essentially fertilize our dead ocean water and prepare it for more complex organisms. On land, our colonists need to grind down some of the former Venusian surface to make soil for nitrogen-fixing plants to grow on. Eventually, billions of trees would spread, creating large forests covering massive parts of the continents. Venus would turn green. To speed things up, CO2 would be strategically released to supply the plants and cyanobacteria. Areas already covered with plants could get extra daylight from our orbital mirrors, so the plants would be active for most of each day.
And that's something we've talked about, but that adaptation, I like that the fact that you can move the sun around, that really speaks to me it makes sense that you would constantly try and optimize this thing and be like, right, this needs more, this needs less, rather than like in my garden, you accidentally put the tomatoes where they shouldn't be and they burn.
Maybe we won't have to do this with the same plants and animals we know today. As genetic engineering matures and our understanding of genetics and the machinery of life expands, we might just engineer life as we need it. All in all, it would take several thousand years to make the atmosphere breathable by humans. In the meantime, you could stroll around with nothing more than regular clothes and an oxygen mask. Settlers would enjoy a vast new planet filled with resources and bathed in sunlight. They might think of new ways to use the vast amounts of carbon dioxide ice and nitrogen orbiting in space above. Industrial processes, rocket fuel, or even boosting the terraforming of another planet like tiny Mars. Venus is fully terraformed. Animals roam through vast ecosystems. Cities are being constructed. Billions of settlers and their descendants make this world their home. They will see images of the past, how Venus was once the most hostile planet around, how it took hundreds of years to freeze hell and to ship in the oceans, and another few thousand years to make it possible to breathe freely. They will barely be able to believe it. Okay, maybe it's not that easy to terraform Venus, and a lot of things must go right for this future to become reality. But it is possible.
And there is the inherent tension in, it's not a we've solved the problem, let's just do it. Like it would take a minute to figure this out, right?
And also, like, it's still precarious. Like it's still something that shouldn't be
Taken for granted.
Yeah. And you don't know which way it's going to go. That's the scary bit, and that's what's happening with AI at the moment, right? People don't know which way it's going to go, but there's a lot in here to say the best course of action over and over again, according to this, is to do the sort of Occam's razor, to do the simplest, to do the simplest thing, but not too simple. Like
the path of least resistance.
Let things steer in their own direction and embrace kind of where they're going, I guess.
Possible, and with technology that is within the reach of a motivated and slightly more advanced humanity that wants to venture into space. The only thing that's stopping it is our imagination, and that at least is a problem that's easy to overcome.
Make a film.
I got to say, that was such a cool video. So good to have some more information about the sort of the set in the world. I think in reference to what we were talking about earlier about the concept of robots that arrive as some kind of seed or blank and then evolve in different ways depending on where they are on the planet. There's that within that video. There's that period of time before people are walking around, whilst the mirror is in place, and that's the time when my mind starts to be like, that would be when all these AIs could be developing their own culture and leaving fossils of the other AI, so that by the time we get there would be this amazing fossil record of all these different types of robots made from all different types of materials that have emerged and became abundant at different stages of the transformation of the planet.
Well, this is interesting, right? Because Loretta and I at the moment are working on a spin-off for this project. There's a webcomic, and we're thinking about having this set maybe a few centuries or something a little bit before our film. So we do get to play with the natural history of the planet and the robots a little bit, and maybe sort of do a bit more world building there.
And the main character of our webcomic is this amazing xenoarchaeologist who is going on a mission to dig up the fossils of the past, because her great-great-great-grandmother was one of the first people to set foot on Mars. But
that fits beautifully then. That makes total sense.
And her great-grandmother's mission failed, and nobody knew what happened to it. And so she's going to go do her archaeology and find out. And what is she going to find? Da, da, da.
Well, I was just going to say that one of the things that got me thinking before, as Loretta and I were having a meeting earlier on the week, was whenever you colonize a new place, there's always been an existing culture there. Whether it's Aboriginals or Native Americans, there was always something there before. And I was thinking that if it takes centuries to colonize Venus, then perhaps there would have been some more Elon Musk types that came before that were kind of rushing it and thought, well, let's just get there and do it. And they died out ages before the sensible humans managed to colonize the planet, so that when they did arrive, there was this sort of left behind culture of just a few people that did arrive first that didn't make it, maybe. And that would be, but that was just something we were exploring for the comic, just to add a little bit.
Maybe back then, the comic takes it back to when it was more divided. The view was like
Hmm.
Mars or Venus, and there's the Elon Musk camp of very sort of engineer minded, metal minded, that sort of
Yeah, basically, we're going to use our webcomic to shit on Elon Musk because that's what I
Nice.
really want to do.
I mean, it would draw attention. I must say, if you've not read his biography, it's an extraordinary story, and he is an extraordinary man. And I do love what he's done in many ways.
I'm actually quite appreciative of Elon Musk because I think we need people like him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be the one to take us to Mars, but he's definitely going to be an important step. I'd rather people be thinking about these things than just not.
But the thing is, for me, like this is something I've been wondering, like, when to bring up with this discussion group, because
Now,
I love Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek, and I love the idea of colonizing far planets. And the discussion and the imagination around it, I think, is a really hugely necessary part of culture. But I don't think that we should be focusing on actually colonizing planets now. Like, I think that any narrative that revolves around capitalism in space, just perpetrating and I know we all agree we don't want to like do the same thing again. But also for me, the idea of like to start to colonize Venus from a place, although we need tension and there is so much tension to be had from all different places, it doesn't have to be that we are starting the colonization of Venus from our current kind of colonialist metal capitalist.
You're right.
Could be that we have managed to, and really should be that we have managed to like understand the principles of interconnectivity, the principles of a more balanced relationship between human nature and technology before we start to transform planets, and that we have understood the philosophy and then applied that to the technology that we send away.
I like that, but I'd like
That's the
to
elephant
see.
in the room.
Sorry. I just want to say
Go
to
on.
Freya that I'm totally on board with what you're saying. And I think that a lot of the technology that we show in the film or in the web comic or in the game or in whatever we produce out of this project can reflect those values, can reflect the value of understanding interconnectedness. It's not the main star of the show, but it is the main supporting actor. Like, the technology is literally like the supporting actor. And I think that's why we were spending so much time thinking about it. And as the supporting actor, the technology will reflect, I think, the understanding that we have of how we should be treating our world. So
Well, then,
like we say, the ergs will not be made out of metal. It'll be made out of whatever's there.
I'm curious though, what was the change in the zeitgeist? Because we haven't spoken about what this dystopia was, because this is a post-dystopian.
Yes.
And obviously there's going to be some kind of like cultural reset to enable us to like, okay, we're at the point now where we can colonize other planets. But
those things don't happen overnight. And that's the thing. I think it's one of those where the time that Freya's talking about it's not going to be that like everyone on Earth feels exactly the same way. There's nuances in how people feel. But I am interested in what Freya's just said as being, we enter where maybe through the comic that has become the dominant view. But actually, there's still this view. There's going to be a group of people who are still like, no, Mars was the best idea. No, doing it that way was the best. This will never work. There's got to be, people who are less convinced, but not to the point where it's, maybe two great big factions or like two. What was the thing in Alien? Right, there's a Wayland. Is it Wayland?
Wayland-Yutani.
Yeah. So, Wayland, he's got all the money.
Worlds.
He's the building better worlds, but he's the monopoly, isn't he? He's got the monopoly on the whole thing, and it's all his money, and it's the capitalism in space. But I think rather than at the same time, I don't think it shouldn't just look like like a socialist's dream either. I think there's got to be
it's
LV-426 was terrible. Like, who would want to live on a planet that's got no life and it's always windy and it's always dark? Like,
One last thing very quickly. Everyone try to use the word ergs to refer to droids from now on. Let's try it out. Let's try it out in our mouths, and we see. Ergs.
It's just out of curiosity. Is there? I like erg. It's a nice. I like nice short punchy things that roll off the tongue. So I like it. Is there an etymology?
Yeah, like erg means work in Greek. Robot means slave. So that's where the thinking came from.
But then
Oh,
it also
okay.
And erg
pretty
sounds
dark.
cute.
But when you describe it, the word sounds cute. But now you've just given me the etymology. I'm like, whoa, that's dark. So we were setting them up as slaves.
No, as in robot was the slaves, but erg just means work. It just
Wasn't
means
robot
work.
a Czech word though? Doesn't it come
It
from a
is.
Czechoslovakian word?
it probably comes
yeah.
from the same root. It's from Greek.
Right.
Like
Yeah, eventually
ergonomic.
comes back, but I think
you know the phrase ergonomics, erg, and erg is also a unit of work in physics.
yeah. Ergs.
So
okay, when you explain it like that, that makes much
I originally
more.
went with ergots, but apparently ergot is a kind of microbe that lives in wheat that gives us LSD. So
which is great, but
We could
no, to me, erg is, when I say it, it sounds guttural.
yeah.
There's no
Erg.
real consonants in there. It's just kind of like from the throat, you know.
Mm.
But that kind of makes it easy for everything to say. But
let's have a think, play around with it. I mean,
Yeah.
words change.
Yeah,
and
this is what I
emerge.
mean.
Yeah,
This is
it
what I
needs
mean.
to, it needs to like how we came up with the name for the group was just throwing shit out there until it's something stuck. So
Yeah.
but erg is
Super
probably the
Motion
best thing
Collective.
so far.
Yeah, we'll try erg, and maybe
Yeah.
if you know, people can always, if anyone, the subscribers that we have, I think 17 subscribers that end up listening to this, can tell us, you know, it's good.
The
You
word
should,
human.
you know, we'll take outside ideas as well. So
Yeah. What would you, let's do a poll. What would you call a robot?
exactly,
A
We're
cute
gonna
one.
call
It has to be
one.
cute.
Yeah,
Cute,
one.
yeah. I want it to be cute, and I want it to be connected to the idea of cooperation rather than competition or evolving or
Yeah.
you know independence, agency. Like, but then maybe it's nice if it started as an erg and then it's evolved into something we didn't expect. Like that also can. Is
But
interesting.
work is neutral. Work is just work, right?
Mm.
Things that need doing rather than a robot, which means slave, which means implies ownership, right?
Yeah.
Erg just means, well, let's just get on with it, you know.
And it would be a purpose because we can't go completely mental. Like, I mean, if we've created them, we must have created them for some sort of purpose,
Yes,
not just out of
exactly.
pure altruistic desire. So I like erg. I can imagine the robot going, like making it would sound like erg, erg, erg,
like a Pokemon that can only say its own name. Yeah.
Cool. Okay,
All right.
let's.
All right.